Okay, good. Hi. Hi, it's Jemima, and I am coming in here to speak to you about three very specific, very practical, actionable pieces of conscious communication that are going to really support you in having conversations that matter with the people who matter to you, and speaking in a way that you can be heard, because so much of communication is lost when we try to mind read, when we take shit personally, and when we just misunderstand what is being said. So I'm going to offer you here some really important pieces that you likely know about already, but hopefully I'm going to say it in such a way that it will land for you and that it will feel really effective. That's what we're going to do today. So welcome, whoever's watching this. And also at the end and underneath, I'm going to drop a link for my new community, Conversations That Connect Us, which is for men and women who want to connect better in all their relationships. Excuse me, I'm turning into a ghost. Okay, slightly better. So, first things first, I want to talk about self-regulation. This is not the same as self-censorship. And it's important that you understand the difference here. So some will be of the mind that it's necessary to just regulate and balance and understand everything before you attempt communication. A, I don't think that's realistic. And B, it's not humans. Like, we are feeling beings. And C, it's not truthful. Truth is my top value. And when we are in our truth and we're moving from that place, it feels satisfying to us because we are expressing who we know ourselves to be. And we're not editing, we're not restricting. Self-regulation then becomes our way of life. It's a way that we take care of ourselves, and it's a way that we stay connected with our own truth. So one of the questions I use all the time in real life and in coaching, so in real life to myself and in my coaching practice, is, what do I want them to know? And it's so effective at just cutting through the noise that tends to appear when it comes to important communication, especially emotive communication. It can get to a point where the truth of the matter, the essence, is beginning to be drowned out by the reactivity, the emotion, just the humanness of the experience. So what do I want them to know is a really, really useful tool that you can use in your self-regulation. So again, let me just emphasize, it's not about editing yourself. It's not about shrinking yourself or not being truthful. It's the exact opposite of that. You being regulated is necessary in order that you can express authentically in a way that can be heard. So what do I mean by that? There are so many tools that we can use now for self-regulation. And I I put it all under the umbrella of self-mastery. So all embodiment, all nervous system regulation, all of the self-soothing techniques that we can learn and practice are all important if we want to have that baseline of stability, that silver thread back to our own equilibrium. And it's also really useful in terms of knowing where we end and where the other person begins. So conversation with another is not the place to process your feelings. It's a place to express them. I'm going to repeat myself. That feels really, really key here. Conversation is not the place to process your feelings. It's a place to express them. What's the difference? The difference is if you come to a conversation raw, unprocessed, and sometimes you will, but if you do that habitually, you have an expectation of the other that they will hold your experience. And it becomes this non-consensual off-gassing of your experience. It becomes an outlet for when you're unwilling or unable to hold the high sensation that is within you. So you are dumping that on the other. And whilst we are human and this happens sometimes, it's not a good habit to continue because it leaves the other person, whoever the other person is, in more of a bracing position, less able or willing to hear what you've actually got to say because their experience of conversations with you has been that they are being put upon and they are the recipient, the unwilling recipient of your too big, too loud, too much sensations, emotions, thoughts and feelings. And they're well within their rights to not want to do that. I mean, everybody has sovereign choice. So if you were to approach your conversations, important conversations, from a self-regulated place, with taking the responsibility for processing your feelings, or to a certain degree, and to taking care of yourself, how might that be different? How might that alter your expression? What flavor might your expression take on? And what quality might the conversation have? Do you think you would get closer to connection or further away from it? So if conversations where you're processing your feelings, you're turning up, wanting to process these big sensations, these big emotions, big thoughts, not quite been able to sit with it yourself yet, the opposite of that is you've taken responsibility. And yes, you may still have big emotions, big thoughts, like messiness, because that's humanity. But the difference, the fundamental difference, is the second option is an invitation and an opportunity to connect and to share your experience responsibly. And what I mean by that is the framing of it. So you are acknowledging at all times the other person's choice. They are choosing to, it's a privilege to be listened to be heard, to be present with somebody. And when you take responsibility for yourself and for how you process, it's cleaner. And the invitation to connect is more noticeable. it becomes more about the collaboration and less about one person extracting from the other in order to soothe themselves. So this self-regulation really has to become a way of living. It has to be something that you are familiar with in order that you know how to take responsibility for yourself in your communication. Which leads me on to the second point, which is repair. Are you always going to attend every instance of communication regulated and resourced? No. Are they? No. So when that happens, is that a breaking point? Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a breaking point, because when you know yourself, you will understand that everybody has a different lens through which they see the world. And if you've got the humility to acknowledge when you fuck up, you have the acceptance to hear how it landed for the other person. And this goes both ways, of course. You can then find the clarity that is necessary so that you can reconnect. And obviously there has to be a willingness there to reconnect as well. And sometimes we need space. Sometimes the reconnection does not happen straight away. Sometimes it doesn't happen in accordance with the other person's desire, which happens especially with anxious attachers. As a recovering anxious attacher, I can attest to that. Often there is the almost like a desperation to reconnect and to feel that that connection is there, and the other person just might not be ready yet. That's not their timeline. They're not ready. And here we have self-mastery again. Can you hold yourself in that discomfort? Can you hold yourself and not abandon yourself in those moments of challenge where you are disconnected because you honor the other person's timing for their own process? You know yourself well enough to know that you end here and they start here. Like, how they respond to you is not personal, and it has the meaning that you assign to it. So one more thing, no, two more things to do with repair. The first one is, I would like the phrase, "that was not my intention," to be banned, because I think it's a shitty thing to say to somebody. I think it absolutely denies their experience. I think it's really gaslighty, and it doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. That's like, I don't want to see you upset. I don't want to sit in the discomfort of seeing you're upset. That's how I translate that phrase. How about instead being able to hold oneself fully enough to be able to hear the other person and to hear how the communication landed for them and why repair is necessary, why they feel upset, why they have difficult feelings and thoughts around this, and what actually happened from their point of view. And if you're going to be sincere about that, then you will have to give up wanting to be right. And that is an element of control. That is just an element of wanting to feel safe, which is such a basic human need. So instead, can you look at where you see yourself really wanting to be right, really wanting to defend, really wanting to say, I didn't mean for that, that you got me wrong, you misunderstanding me. When you feel drawn to that, can you instead inquire within, which part of me feels unsafe right now? What am I afraid of? What do I need? How can I help myself feel soothed and balanced and back to my equilibrium? How can I do that? Because grasping outside of you is never the way. Even if for the simple fact that it's not sustainable, because you cannot, it's childish. You cannot expect someone else to be responsible for your experience. These are very basics of conscious communication. And I think there are some principles in here that can be very hard to swallow. And I think that's why some people find it very difficult. Maybe all people do. I certainly do. I consider myself a lifetime learner of conscious communication. And I am often reactive. I often get it wrong. And I accept that. I accept that that's part of my humanity. And I'm always trying to do better. And I'm always open to hearing about the other person's experience. So this leads me on to the third point, which is curiosity, genuine curiosity. Can you develop the openness to really know someone else's experience? And one of the things around this is you're going to have to be willing to not take shit personally, or to stop taking so much personally, because there'll be times when somebody won't respond to you, or somebody will respond in a certain way, and it's very natural to take offense or to think, well, that's unfair, or I don't deserve to be spoken to that way, It's like, it's natural. It's okay. We're not trying to get rid of that. What we're attempting to do is develop more awareness around when that happens. Okay, what was actually at play here? Have I been clear in my communication? Okay, and is this how they usually are? If it's someone you're close with, is this a usual thing that needs addressing? Is it a one-off? Is it someone you don't know very well? And to take the assumption that someone might be having a bad day, or someone finds it very difficult to say no, or finds it tricky to be truthful in their communication, is pretty much always the wiser course of action that will lead you somewhere better, because there is no mileage in focusing your energy and your attention on upset and disharmony and ways that we misunderstand each other, because they are endless. There is endless possibility for misunderstandings and disagreements. And do you really want to expend your valuable life force energy in that place? Or would you rather take responsibility for the only thing that you sanely can take responsibility for, and that's your part, your contribution, the way that you communicate, the way that you express? So for this to be true, you do need to be able to hold yourself. And this goes back to the very first point about self-regulation. You do need to be able to hold high sensation, to manage your own state, and to know where your boundaries are, to know what your values are, to know your sense of self, like again, where you end and where the other begins. You do need to know those things. You do need to have familiarity with those things if you're going to commit to this curiosity and not take things personally, because when you can do that, the whole thing becomes this beautiful exploration of humanity. It's like, oh wow, people are so different, you know, that is just not how I would express, or that is not what I understood from that comment. And how curious and how interesting that that's how someone else sees the world, and it's so different to how I see the world. And then you start to get into the compassion and get into the inquiry about what lenses people use to view experiences through, how they got those lenses, maybe from their conditioning, from their childhood, from their upbringing, from their learning. And when you can do that, your bandwidth grows exponentially, your tolerance grows exponentially, and your ability to connect with all different kinds of people in all different types of relationships grows exponentially. I do not know one person who doesn't want to enjoy harmonious relationships. It's part of why we're here. It's part of being a human being on this planet, that we're not doing it alone. We're doing it together. We're interdependent. And this goes right from the local, from your family who live in your house with you, your colleagues at work, your friends, your acquaintances, your online presence, all the way up to global conflicts and government and big, big, big stuff. These tools are important for all of it. And we can only improve when we practice. We can only get better at this stuff when we practice in real time. You can read all the books you want. You can keep learning and have all the intellectual knowledge, have all of the catchphrases, know about all the methodologies, and it won't serve you until you start practicing in real life with real other humans, because that is when you'll be tested, and that's when you can embody what you've learned. And I like to liken it to, you can read about driving a car and you could spend years reading all the manuals and reading the highway code and reading all the instructions, and none of that will compare to sitting in the driving seat behind the wheel, switching the engine on and being on the road with traffic. Like they're just, you're not comparing apples with apples. So this is very much the same. And at the moment, I don't see many spaces where we can practice, specifically men and women together, because I am aware that there are some generalities in the ways that men communicate, in the ways that women communicate. And I see and I have experienced how we get it wrong with each other. So easy to do. So how about if we could come together and we could learn from each other, we could learn our unique ways, we could respect and honor other people's versions of reality, and we could learn how to connect with them without denying someone else's reality, and actually offering a very forgiving and clear space for us to connect together. If we could do that, we could begin to change the whole shape of love relationships, of family dynamics, of businesses and workplaces, of friendships, so much. There is so much potential. And this is what I'm creating. My new project is a community project called Conversations That Connect Us. And until tomorrow, it's $23 a month to come and take part. We're going to have one practice call per month. And we're going to do that over Zoom, because there are people all over the world who are joining, which it excites me no end. And then we're also going to have a Telegram group where we will leave voice notes. I will leave daily prompts. We'll leave voice notes and practice actually using our voices and the nuance of communication and being really, really honest with each other, which is always easier with strangers and always more challenging with the people that you have an existing dynamic with. So I'm super excited about creating this community and about us coming together, men and women, to practice and to just, again, develop that curiosity and be like, oh, wow, I had no idea that this is how it felt for you. I had no idea that when I say this, you think I mean this, and I really don't. I mean, and this comes on to what I call meta communication, which I teach on as well. Which is a very useful tool. But what I want you to know is that I'm going to be sharing everything that I know in terms of embodiment, in terms of communication, in terms of connection, in terms of consciousness that I have been actively learning for over 25 years. And I'm going to be leading this community in doing that together, becoming cohesive, becoming internally coherent, becoming very clear, joyful connectors, so that every relationship that you go into, that you co-create, benefits. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so excited about this. I'm going to put the link to join conversations underneath this video. And if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to DM me. And I will see you soon. Lots of love. Bye-bye.